Director of the Recreation Commission.
This is all ours. I could put it back here. No, I don't.
Be sitting in front of it.
Good afternoon. It is 3:02. We'll now call the Richland County fiscal year 24-25 budget. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
Brenham,
Present.
Pugh, McBride, Livingston, Teratio, Weaver,
Here.
Barron, Walker,
Here.
Mackey,
Here.
English,
Present.
Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Administrator Brown, do you have any additions, deletions to the agenda this afternoon?
Madam Chair, I do have one addition. Would like to add a 5-year assessment which is presented by the county auditor, Mr. Brawley, and would like to have that come after Millage Agencies at the end of the listing that you currently have.
We are adding item number 6 will be 5-year assessment presented by Auditor Brawley. Item number 7 will become adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Madam Clerk?
Brenham,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Walker, Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Okay, I want to say, we have a few council members online. I can't see the whole screen, so Madam Clerk, please, as we go through this today, please alert me if any of them raise their hand for questions so we can make sure we're including all those that would like to participate. So the first item this afternoon is our general fund discussion. Administrator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of council, we're going to have a number of presenters on this afternoon, and even with the general fund presentation, we're going to have a number of presenters. We're going to ask, Madam Chair, that you would start by recognizing Assistant County Administrator Lori Thomas, who will initially talk about the general fund and the recommended budget.
Thank you. ACA Thomas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pardon our technical difficulties. Thank you all for having us here this afternoon and for recognizing me, Madam Chair, council members. We're pleased to begin to talk today about the general fund for the county for fiscal year 24-25, and I'm pleased to say that this year we will be presenting to you a way to have a balanced budget using current year revenues against current year expenditures only. This will be the first time in about 10 years that we believe that the county has been able to propose this, and we hope that you'll find this agreeable. Going through the agenda, first we'll talk about strategic budget initiatives, the general fund overview, general fund details, new position recommendations, land development fee schedules, debt service recommendations. We'll have a few of our millage agencies that will be making presentations to you, and then the auditor will close us out this afternoon by explaining the 5-year reassessment to you. Moving to slide 4 in your handout that you have. This is talking about our strategic budget initiatives this year and those that we're focusing on. If you recall, one of the things that we have been following as a pattern for the last 2 years is aligning our budget according to our strategic plan. The first item there is the continued implementation of the compensation study. If you recall, last year we allocated $10 million toward a cost of living increase and the implementation of a new step pay plan for all employees that were to bring them closer to market rate. I'm pleased to say that in FY24, we allocated $4.4 million for a cost of living increase. And while we had $5.5 million allocated for 6 months of the compensation study implementation, it did come in slightly under budget at around $4.5 million. In the coming year's budget, we are proposing a 2.5% step increase for all county employees in October of 2024. This aligns with our initiative for better governance by having all performance appraisals for all employees done in the July-August timeframe, with all increases to be done in the October timeframe, so that we will then be setting goals for all employees, being able to evaluate their performance and actually awarding that performance all at the same time, rather than doing it on employee anniversary date. We believe that this makes the playing field a little more level and makes employee morale a little better as well. In FY24, we do have about $4.5 million that is carrying forward to cover the second half of the implementation of the compensation study. Not an additional ask, but rather the cost of the new salaries that were implemented at the end of 2024. The 2.5% that we're proposing for all employees for the next step would be approximately $2.184 million for the general fund. And the full year of the 24-25 wage assessment, as I said, would be captured there. And moving forward, you would see about a 2.5% or a proposed 2.5% step increase every year. So you would be looking at the 2.184 amount times 2.5%. That would be where we would hope to be able to continue this moving forward for our employees. I would point out that the state this year does plan a pay increase, but as of today, there's some difference between what the Senate has proposed and what the House has proposed. So we imagine it's going to be somewhere between 1.75% or 1.5% with a minimum of $1,000, or 2.75%, depending on what happens in committee. Any questions?
Councilwoman Newton, you're recognized.
Thank you. And so looking at the 2.5% increase that increases annually, just clarifying that every year, that's also going to be separate from the COLA like we see it here.
If a COLA is proposed, that is correct. In this year's budget, so that we can present a balanced budget, we are not proposing a COLA.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you, A.C. Thomas.
Another focus of our strategic plan was to try to find new sources for revenue, or try to find areas where we may be able to improve and increase our revenue rather than by tax increases. One of those that we have identified this year is to refine and redesign the land development fee schedule. And through this, Sharani Fuller, who's a county engineer, will be presenting that information to you a bit later, and this would align us more closely with other counties in South Carolina and the fees that they do charge. Also last year, as we discussed with you during our 24 budget process, was the fact that most county entities actually do charge funds other than those in the general fund for the services that the direct service, the internal services perform for their funds. This would be your enterprise funds and many of your special revenue funds. The thought behind this is that if you use general fund dollars to actually pay for all of these services, you have taxpayers who are subsidizing ratepayers. By directly allocating these funds, we're more precisely aligning resources to their actual derivation. In the FY 2025 budget, we are actually proposing $4.761 million in a transfer from other funds back to the general fund, thus reducing the cost to the general fund. In the coming budget, also with the state of South Carolina, the state health plan is increasing by 11.8%. The cost for this is approximately $1.1 million for the county. I'd like to point out that in 2002, prior to migrating to the state health plan, the county's budget for health insurance was $20.6 million. This year, our proposed budget and recommended budget is $14.7 million. So there's still, even with an increase last year of 3.8% and an increase this year of 11.8%, approximately a $6 million savings to the county by that change.
Chair.
You're recognized, Ms. Newton.
Right, could you just repeat that number, the new 14?
14.7 million.
Thank you.
And that will be presented in details a bit further in the presentation. We're also recommending an increase in our self-funded losses for all of our claims that come against the county of $1 million. We're starting to see claims actually increase. This is just the litigious market that we're in currently. And as we settle these claims and clean out what has been remaining from the pre-COVID times where the judicial system was somewhat bottlenecked, we are experiencing higher than normal losses. So we're proposing an additional $1 million to fund self-funded losses. Of course, if that's not used, it would remain in the general fund. Our workers' compensation insurance this year has increased by $612,000. This also funds self-funded losses for the workers' compensation fund as well. We do have a $300,000 per occurrence retainage that we have to keep our rates low. The total of these insurance impacts totals $2.7 million in increased costs for the general fund. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilman Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Thomas, I'm not familiar with the term self-funded losses budget increase. What exactly does that mean?
The county is self-funded for all general liability claims. In other words, we don't have an insurance carrier that covers those claims. This is not uncommon for governments. I can tell you that the City of Columbia does the same thing. Keep in mind that many of our claims are actually tort claims, which by state statute have a cap on those for value. And so back in the 2000-2001 timeframe, the county chose to become self-funded. So this is just increasing the amount that we keep in a bucket to be able to pay and settle claims.
So there's no insurance carrier that we go back to. We're just paying it out of pocket.
Correct, for our general liability. Now, our workers' compensation, we do have a carrier, but we do carry the first $300,000.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Teresh.
Thank you. I'm trying to formulate the question.
has there been an assessment of whether the self-funded methodology would be better, or if there is have we looked at what it would cost to have an insurance company cover these kinds of things? And do you have any kind of brief remarks on the pros and cons?
Very briefly, I would say that we have sought coverage on the market. However, when you have quite a few claims, especially in the insurance market that you have today, finding that coverage is, number one, very difficult, and number two, very costly. We still are looking for that, and we do still have funding that's set aside. It could be taken from these funds if we were able to secure a carrier that might be able to present to us a good alternative.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Barron?
Thank you. ACA Thomas, just help me, I want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. So when you mentioned about the administrative indirect cost allocation to the special revenue and enterprises, those funds are only going into that area for our general fund, or that $4.7 million that's going, or is it going just for those particular areas, or is it just a part of the general fund altogether?
That $4.7 million will be transferred from those other funds back to the general fund.
So with that, then the increase that we talk about, or the adjustments with the insurance and such, would be, we could offset that $2.7 million from the 4.7.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So at a very high-level overview, the general fund this year, we are recommending personnel costs will come in at a little over $149 million. This is actually virtually the same as last year because, as I said, we did not spend as much as we had anticipated on the compensation study. And additionally, we still do have quite a bit of vacancies. Last year, we had thought we might be able to fill more of those, but we still do carry a significant vacancy rate. While we have seen it come down somewhat, we are experiencing a lot of retirements. Which is another one of those reasons that doesn't mean that people are leaving you because they're going other places. It means they're leaving you because they want to stay at home. On the operating side, we're only looking at a 1% increase, which is going from $56.3 million to $56.9 million. As you will note, our personnel is 3 times what our operating costs are for the county, which is very common. On capital expenditures this year, you notice that we have $7.6 million that we're recommending for the budget as compared to 1.1 last year. That's a little deceptive. Last year, we did give you a capital improvement plan. However, we just showed it in a different format. So now this year, you're actually going to see what we're appropriating to take from the assigned fund balance that is specifically assigned for capital projects. So of the $1.7 million, $6.2 million is being used for equipment and capital projects that will be coming from fund balance, but it's not our unassigned fund balance, which is used for general purposes if necessary, and which is, if you will, our safety net. It's coming from an assigned fund balance of the $3.5 million that we collect annually for capital. Transfers out represent $15 million. Again, this is a bit of an accounting statement change. We're actually showing the vehicle transfer out of those capital improvement funds as well, capital and equipment funds in that transfer out. So that's your difference between last year and this year. And then, of course, the implementation of the compensation study, which is your 2.5% recommended recommended step increase this year for employees of $2.1 million. Any questions? If not, I'll move on. Our general fund revenue, we're showing this year at $216 million. That's at 59.9 mils. We'll be transferring in the $8.286 million. This is directly the impact of $3.5 million from hospitality tax, $25,000 from accommodations tax, and the transfer in from the cost allocation program. And then again, the use of fund balance of $6.225 million, which is for capital and which comes from the assigned fund balance, which is for capital. Questions?
Councilman Weaver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the 3.5 mils you just mentioned for capital?
Yes, sir. The county bills 3.5 million on your tax bills every year that is assigned for capital. At the end of every fiscal year, when we've spent what was in the annual budget, we move all remaining into the assigned fund balance for capital. Currently, there's about $18 million in that assigned fund balance, and it is specifically for capital improvements and equipment.
So that's building what we're got going on at Columbia Mall, basically?
No, sir,
You
these
don't
are
have to go through
smaller
the whole list,
projects. These are smaller projects. This is your roofs. This is improvements to buildings. We'll be showing you a list of those projects later. One would be improvements to this facility, improvements to keep the courthouse functional until such time we can make a decision about that.
Okay.
So those are the kinds of things you should be funding there.
Okay, thank you.
I thought it would be interesting to show you a little bit of the history of the millage rate in Richland County. This goes the last 15 years. It shows that if we had kept up with our millage according to the trends that we established in that 15-year time frame, you would be looking at somewhere in the range of 62 to 63 mils would be the typical billing rate for a resident. The next slide shows you property tax growth versus inflation. As you can see here, back in 22, our paths sort of crossed. Prior to that time, our tax collections and property taxes have been growing more quickly than inflation. Quickly, that changed in 2021 with a delta of about 6.5% in 2022 and about another 3.5% in 2023. We don't have 2024 numbers yet. However, I can tell you we've not returned to the 2% level that the Fed has been working toward, and our property tax increase last year only increased by 0.5%. Questions? Thought I'd show you a little bit about our peer county millage rates and what they did last year. There are 9 counties that are over 250,000 in population in the state of South Carolina, and that's what this chart represents. As you can see, only Berkeley, Richland, and Charleston didn't have a general fund property tax increase last year. All of our other peers did. Some in the range of 5%, some a little bit larger. The mill value actually isn't really significant. The numbers of 48.5, 67.5 and such, that's because everybody has a different mill value for their counties. Questions?
Madam Chair.
You recognize, who was it? Mr. Ratio.
Thank you.
And Ms. Newman.
Can we give a copy of this to all the members of the General Assembly who like to bring this up?
It is available right now on the county website. You are free to share widely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Newton. Thank you. Asa Thomas, Carrie.
The next slide shows you some data that I think is a little more relevant and sort of puts it in perspective. The projected property tax collections are to the left. That's just based on last year's numbers. As you can see, while Charleston may have a lower millage rate, they actually collect quite a lot more in property taxes. And keep in mind, when I'm talking about revenue, this is strictly property taxes to operate their county upon. While Richland County is the second largest county, we are the we are the right dead in the middle of the 9 for collections. And to your right, you'll see the property tax collections per capita. As you can see, Richland County is the lowest per capita tax collection.
Ms. Newton, you're right.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and not to divert us too much here, but when you look at a place like Charleston, who has a lower millage rate, is the difference that we're seeing there just because of higher value properties. So,
Higher and more.
okay.
Councilman Weaver?
Normally I would have.
You're good. You're good on property value. ACA Thomas?
With that, if you would, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it over to Budget Director Wilkerson, and she will walk us through some of the finer details of the budget.
Thank you. Director Wilson, you're recognized.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today to give you a little bit more detail of what ACA Thomas just went over. Right now we're on slide 13, which gives you our revenue by grouping. So to kind of highlight a few of these items, so we have our 23 budget, we have our 24 budget, and then we also have our 25 projected, which includes the 59.9 mils that ACA Thomas just mentioned. So in the property and other taxes category, we are projecting a 4% increase here. This does include the revenue groupings as mirrored from our annual comprehensive financial report, and this is presented in our FY 2023 ACFR by our auditors. So as presented, property and other taxes include real and personal property taxes, delinquent and penalties, plus county documentary and recording stamps. So that's a little bit of a change from what you may kind of think about when you think about property taxes, but this is how it was grouped in our ACFR. Additionally, I did want to point out license and permits. We are projecting a 15% growth here. This is up based on the business license fee changes that were implemented in the current year. So if y'all recall this time last year, that was a big highlight of the general fund process, was talking about the business license fee schedule, and additionally making sure that they are going out to recover all of the license fees that they can from that standpoint. Additionally, we have seen strong growth in building permits. So we have adjusted a little bit here. Again, very slight growth going into the new year just based on the economy and kind of seeing trends and things like that, but that is also included. In the intergovernmental line, you're also seeing about a 13% increase here. This comes directly from the local government fund distribution that's prepared by the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office. They are showing almost $1 million increase to Richland County projected for the new fiscal year. Again, this is still, somewhat up in the air because they have not approved a budget yet, but in both offerings between the House and the Senate, that $1 million is included in there. Additionally, we are seeing some pass-through revenue that does increase this intergovernmental line item. But again, when I say pass-through, that means that it comes into Richland County and we directly pass it out to the organization. So one of those would be the mini bottle revenue that we collect. That does come in, and it has been strong and through the past couple of years. But again, that is directly then sent out to LRADAC, which that's the Lexington Revenue, what is it? Lexington, Richland, Alcohol and Drug Abuse. So that, again, just a pass through, but you will notice that that is a slight increase in the intergovernmental. So charges for services.
Director,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
when we talk about being a pass-through, is that a state law, or do you know?
I am not sure if that's an agreement or if that is state law. State law. I'm hearing that it's state law. I apologize for that.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. So looking at charges for services, we are projecting just a slight growth there, about 1%. Fees and fines, again, about a 15% growth here. This is mostly due to collections from traffic court fines that we're actually seeing in the current year. So again, when we're looking at our budget, we're looking at budget, but we're also looking at actuals that we've collected and any trends there. So that's what any of these kind of larger projections are looking at. For interest, you'll see here In the current year, we projected, or we had a budget about $2.5 million in interest. We have already collected over $8 million in interest, and that's just due to the interest rate environment that we're in right now. We are hearing from the feds that this interest rate could start dropping in the new year, but we don't expect them to drop drastically. So we did increase that budget for interest to $7.8 million. And then lastly, on the other revenue, you'll notice that one does have a 21% decrease. So the majority of this decrease is actually due to the changes at the detention center regarding inmate calls. So we used to get a commission of about $630,000 from those calls. And I believe that change was made a year or two ago. So we're just recognizing that in this year's budget. And then lastly, as ACA Thomas mentioned about the transfers. So again, we've got the transfers for H-Tax and A-Tax, and of course the transfer from the cost allocation plan, the use of assigned fund balance for capital projects. So overall, general fund revenue of $231,405,000, or about a 6% increase over the current year budget. So changing gears a little bit to go to the expenditure side. So as we look through this, again, you're welcome to follow along with your recommended budget book. This is on pages 10 through 19. But what we like to do here is look at some kind of in different groupings. So our 10 largest departmental expenditures, this includes personnel, operating, and capital. You'll notice here, of course, the largest expenditures are the ones that have the most personnel. As ACA Thomas mentioned before, about 75% of our budget is personnel related. So, of course, any that have large personnel numbers, those are going to be our largest in terms of expenditures. So we certainly have the Sheriff's Office, the Detention Center, EMS. We also have County Risk Management on here. This is not necessarily due to personnel, but as ACA Thompson mentioned earlier, this is more due to the claims and the premiums increases that we're seeing that are all budgeted in risk management. So looking at this from a little bit of a different standpoint, this is kind of based on percentages this time. So you'll notice that we do have some, while they may not be high dollars, they are high in percentage. So with facilities and ground, the projects, if y'all recall, there was an additional position added in the current year. So that is that one position. So again, it looks like, 94% increase sounds like a lot, but in terms of dollars, it is not that significant. Grants department also, you'll see in a few slides that we are recommending a few new positions for grants. For our lump sum agencies, so this is where our SIG or our community impact grants are paid from. We also have other commitments that we pay out of our lump sum category. This includes the Central Midlands COG, Main Street District, and as I mentioned before, LRADAC is also paid through lump sum agencies. From a public information perspective, this is one department that did see about a 36% increase. The main driver of this was on the operating side and adding more funding for advertisement in terms of the transportation penny that's upcoming. We want to make sure that they had the funding necessary for the education materials that will come with the transportation penny. I think we've talked about risk management. And then,
Director,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
the website include?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then if you look at it from a true dollar perspective, again, the top ones are going to be your high personnel. So that would be the sheriff, EMS. We spoke about lump sum agencies. We also have facilities and ground maintenance in here. We are looking, that's more on the operating side to do some more in-house projects with maintaining our facilities. And then as ACA Thompson mentioned, or Thomas, I apologize, mentioned earlier, also health insurance. We are noticing that 11.8% increase as well under health insurance.
Madam Chair.
I recognize Mr.
Thank you. Just wanted to dig into the lump sum agencies a little bit more. You mentioned some of the standard groups where we have membership dues, so the Central Midlands COG, the Main Street District, and you also mentioned the community impact grants. That still just feels like a big increase. Is that driven by the value of the mill? Is there something else that really made that go up?
No, so So looking at the current year, so the 2.18, it looks like that only was looking at the SIG impact. And then as there were a few other items that were not included in there. So the Lorraine Act, it should have been included at 600,000.
So we're reporting this differently.
Yes.
And that's affecting, okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
So it's not necessarily really a true increase. It's, like you said, it's a reporting differently.
Well,
Same organizations, yes, ma'am.
I don't know how this is going to end up being reported, but it would be lovely if there was some sort of contextualization of that, because there's no way for somebody to look and say, oh, this is double the amount because double the people are included. I don't think that's a natural assumption. Thank you.
And I think we could certainly asterisk that going forward, so I appreciate that suggestion.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Weaver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is included in county risk management? What departments is that, or?
So the county risk management is our insurance, essentially. So
Oh, just
that-
insurance, basically?
Yeah, pretty much it's our insurance. So
Okay.
general liability, workers' comp. I believe some of our property insurance is also included in that. All property, I apologize, is also included in that.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay.
All right, and so the next few slides do include all of our expenditures by department. Again, we're trying to show you a little bit of historical, so we do have your 23 budget. Yes,
I'm sorry, I had a question. I thought you were gonna go through the other table.
okay.
Sorry. So in here, when you talk about going back to a lump sum, that's what you mean by the highest increase?
Yes.
That was just that amount. So for the other ones that are above that, the sheriff, is that employee? The risk, is that employees or is that insurance?
Yes.
And then EMS, is that employees or is that something else?
So certainly for sheriff and EMS, that's mostly employee-related. So again, going into a new year, when we have a full year of the compensation study underway, that's the majority of their increase. I will say the sheriff, when they came and presented their budget, I think they asked for like 30,000 in additional operating. It was all related to personnel. And then county risk management, as we mentioned, that is truly operating, so that's that insurance piece. Lump sum agencies, I believe we talked about that. Facilities and grounds, this is, again, some of it is personnel related. I mean, a lot of these, you have to think about the number of employees in each department. So if they have a large number of employees, the majority of the increase truly is going to be personnel related, just from the compensation study. But I will say with facilities and grounds, they are trying to do more projects in-house. You know, if it's under $50,000, they're trying to do that in-house. And so that could also be a piece of that. But as far as like solicitor and county administrator, magistrate, those are all heavy personnel related.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So again.
Excuse me, Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am, you're recognized, Ms. English.
I just have a quick question. On those where we're recognizing the employees, does that include all positions, whether they are filled or not?
Yes, so we budget for all positions if they are filled. And then it depends on the department how we budget for the vacancy. So we did do some research and some trends with different departments. And if we found that they had a high vacancy rate that was consistent, we budgeted at either 75% fill for the year on those vacancies or even 50% fill for those vacancies, depending on the department. So we did work with HR on some of that. I believe in the past it was kind of just an overall 97% fill rate. But we tried to be a little bit more granular this year. And so we did look on it on a case-by-case basis. So as far as the sheriff, they are pretty filled for most of the year. We do see that is filled, so they don't really have as much of a vacancy factor. But if you look at something like the detention center, they do have a higher vacancy factor, and that's just the trend. That's what we're seeing. Of course, the compensation study is helping out with that. But we have seen, we wanted to look at it by a department basis.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So moving to the next slide, slide 17, this just gives you an overview of each department within the general fund. Again, shows you the 23 budget, the 23 actual, 24 budget, 25 requested and recommended. So again, this is just in summary. I'll certainly pause here if there's any that catch your eye and you want to talk about. As ACA Thomas mentioned, we do have capital projects, which is not necessarily a new item for the county, but it is presented differently than it has been in the past. So we want to make sure that we are assigning, using that 6.2 million of assigned fund balance for those capital projects and presenting it at the same time as the budget.
Madam Chair.
You're recognized.
Thank you. And there are always lots of pages that we can look at. When you look at this slide 17, as we go through the budget process, will we also see the recommended as a percentage increase over the previous year?
We can certainly show it that way. I don't believe it's shown that way in your recommended budget book.
I don't see it there,
Okay.
but I just wanted to ask.
If that's something, yeah, we can certainly work on that. So you said as a the
I'm
recommended.
just curious.
So, I'm sorry, they're recommended as a percentage of the 24 budget or 25 request?
I guess as compared to the 24 budget.
24 budget, we can certainly do that. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. And if that's something that would clutter this up and other people aren't interested, I'm happy to see it, a different way.
And that may be something, we share
Yep,
at a later
thank
date,
you.
if that's okay.
Madam Chair.
Recognized, Councilman Weaver.
Thank you. I guess it goes without saying that fiscal year 25 requested, that's from the department itself, and then recommended is what the administration is recommending?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just want to clarify that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we did, and again, I know some of you, I guess, is this your first budget or second budget? No.
I
It's your
think
second.
it's my second. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for keeping me on point.
Yeah. And I apologize for that. It is my first budget, but I just want to, recognize that we do meet with each of the departments, usually between February and March of each year. They have an opportunity to submit their request ahead of time, and then they actually come and meet with us, with the full administrative team and budget team, and they can talk through any requests that they have. And then that's also time where we tell them of any items that are upcoming. So one of the things that we talk about is certainly, we are recommending the 2.5% increase from salary. So that's something that we talked about in that time frame as well.
Thank you.
Recognized, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you. So I noticed that line item 3, the probate court advertising, we did have it, now we no longer have it. Is it because it's now a part of the communications budget, or because it's advertising?
I'm not sure. It looks like it was removed in 24, but I can certainly look into that. I'm not sure.
I don't recall why, and so I was just curious.
We can certainly look into that. I'm not sure offhand.
Thank
All right. And again, these next few slides do show each department. Again, I'll pause if there's any specific questions that you do have. I will say for the budget department, seeing that increase, that as I came in, I wanted to make sure that y'all are aware that the increase related to this is some of our software items. So we do use ClearGov for budgeting purposes, and this is what we actually distribute out to the departments. And then we also use Invisio, as y'all know, for strategic planning. So that did increase our budget slightly going into fiscal year 25.
Recognized, Councilman Branham.
Going back to that last slide, the council services is up about $170,000. That's due to 2 new positions, including a research analyst, and what was the other one?
Public policy. So we
Okay.
have, and both of those positions we'll highlight in just a minute, but those are
Okay.
recommended for, to start in January. And there was also an additional request from the clerk's office regarding, what was it, additional 25,000, do you recall? I can't think of it offhand. Just council-related expenses. But yes, sir, the majority of that is the 2 positions.
Thank you.
All right, so overall, again, total expenditures recommended for FY 2025 are $216,285,000. And this is up from $208,968,000 in fiscal year 24. So as Mr. Brina mentioned a minute ago, we do have some recommendations as far as new positions. So submitted to the Budget and Administrative team were a request of 25 positions. Those are listed on your slide 21. Of those 25 requested positions, the administration is recommending 8. The first one is an information specialist in the clerk of court's office. I do want to mention all of these positions are recommended to start in January, with the exception of the civilian accreditation manager in the sheriff's office. So this was actually grant funded, and the grant will end in October. So we do recommend funding from October forward. But again, the information specialist in clerk of court, a deputy coroner in the coroner's office, a research analyst 2 in council services, public policy in council services, a supervisor of residential appraisal in the assessor's office, an emergency planner in emergency services, a grant coordinator in the grants department, and lastly, the civilian accreditation manager in the sheriff's office.
Madam Chair.
You're recognized.
Thank you. Just a question about the, I'm not as familiar with the other departments, but we obviously work closely with council services. And so my question is, for these positions, are they intended to be full-time, permanent positions?
All positions recommended are full-time.
Okay. And so, I'm trying to ask this question the right way. How do we determine what those salaries are? Is it the pay bands for the type of work that folks are doing? I'm assuming that at a $26,999, that's a pretty entry-level position.
Well, again, it's for a half a year. So the $26,999 is half a year, so you would double that for the
Got it.
full year salary.
Okay.
But we actually have an existing position called research analyst 2, so that was already in our HR code of positions. So that's where that value came from. And then the public policy, I believe that we did some research there to come up with that number.
Okay, so what we're looking at here, are all of these for 6 months?
Yes.
Okay.
6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Again, and that was in an effort to keep the budget balanced.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions on new position? Okay. All right, well, that is all for me for now. I will turn it over to Director Maloney.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Recognized. Yeah, you're fine.
I was just thinking about what Mr. Horatio said. So if all these costs are for a half a year, you're saying this is 6 months, so the full budget impact would be double this, correct?
Yes, in the next year. So in fiscal year
For
2026.
2025?
Fiscal year 2026, it will be a full
26.
year. Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the cost in 25, doubling for 26?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry. Do we have anybody on?
All right. Thank you.
You're recognized.
Thank you,
Director
Madam
Fuller.
Chair.
You're welcome.
Members of council, good afternoon. I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about the land development fee schedule. So why am I here? The current fees that are associated with development in Richland County, and we want to look at other counties too. We're going to look at a couple different scenarios and then discuss the potential changes with the fee schedule. So as ACA Thomas mentioned at the beginning, one of the reasons for this is to align resources. So right now we are missing revenue that does exist. We want to also align with what other counties in the area are doing, and then just general accountability. I'll pause for just a second. You do have a handout. It's also part of your packet. It's not going to be in the presentation because it's just a little bit too busy, but I did want to share that with you. So that is basically the full research that was done. And if you read across the top of each page, you'll see the different fee types. Yes, that's it. You'll see the different fee
Big.
types.
17. Yes, I know, it was hard to
Okay.
tell with,
Apologies. Yes, the 11 by 17. So if you read across the top header, you'll see what you're looking at. The first 2 pages are going to be residential, then you've got commercial, plats and sureties, and then the last couple pages are general scenario, just to kind of bring everything together for you. On the left of each page is the jurisdiction that is charging those fees. So I guess one of the things when you're looking at that, a takeaway is that this isn't really apples to apples. It's more apples and oranges. There is no one right way to do this. So everyone's doing things a little bit differently. And there are some folks out there, you know, in the surrounding area doing some very interesting things. But for the presentation, you're not going to see all of that detail. What I did pull out is going to be the counties that are similar to us in size and have a similar kind of development type issues that we have. So for instance, you'll see City of Columbia in that fee comparison, but the City of Columbia does not have the same development type issues that we do. So I did not put them in the presentation itself. But the first thing I wanted to talk about is the current process for plan review, just so we're all on the same page. Right now, the way the county does it, everything is digital and electronic. We don't take hard copies anymore. So we use a system called Track It. It comes in, it gets screened. So let's just say this is a scenario with a subdivision review. So you're going to see multiple reviewers up there. So you've got a review for flood, engineering, fire, GIS, land development, naming, and then the screening person. So those are all the people that are typically involved in a subdivision or commercial development review. So this is just kind of bring to your attention the resources that are currently being used at the county to provide these services for development itself. All right, this is a lot of information, so I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll pull out the important things. This comes straight off the county's website. This is our current fee schedule. So residential is broken into 3 categories. You've got major, minor, and administrative. The initial sketch plan is kind of what is your conceptual idea. It's usually just 1 page. So there's, if you're looking at major subdivisions, there is a $526 fee for that. Preliminary plans, that means your full engineering set of plans. So this is what should be your 100% construction plans that you're submitting to us for review. So again, $421.25, and then you've got a charge of $16.86 per lot for the first 80 lots, then $8.42 up to 81 lots. You also have a one-time inspection fee of $368.59. So what I'll say about that, that inspection fee is the inspection for the folks that are going out to monitor. They're looking for stormwater, site development, erosion control. They're going to check the roads as they're being built. They're going to look at the drainage as it's being installed. This is a one-time fee. It does not matter how big your subdivision is. You pay that once, and you can build 5,000 houses if you want. So, and you can see all the other fees for subdivisions. I won't read them all out, but I will pause if there's any questions.
thank you. You mentioned that last piece where you said you pay this and you can build 5,000 houses if you want. Is that typical for other counties in our state, or is that typical across the U.S.? Or?
So I can't speak to the U.S. If you do look at that sheet, the 11 by 17, that information is on there. So
I see the other counties now.
Yeah, so again, people are referring to things a little bit differently, but if I can draw your attention, if you're looking to the residential page, the very first page, if you kind of slide over where you see MS4 inspections, that's typically going to cover your on-site stormwater, your site inspections, your grading inspections. They're looking to make sure you have your erosion control done correctly. That's what that MS4 means. And on the second page of commercial, if you look at infrastructure fees, there are folks that are charging for inspections of anything that's going to be public infrastructure. They have a separate fee for that.
Recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what does it mean if Richland County current at the top, Richland County proposed at the bottom, so I get that's the proposed fee, but what does it mean if there's nothing in the box at the top? It's purple. What does that mean? There's no fee exists now?
Correct. Yeah,
So
there's no
wow,
charge.
we're adding quite a few fees here.
Yes.
Wow, across the board. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. So again, I won't read out the commercial, but there's a breakdown also for industrial sites, multifamily, and then communication towers, which is not a very common. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and propose a scenario to you just to kind of see where we're at in the kind of the big picture scheme of things. So if you've got a plan review for a major subdivision with 50 lots, in Richland County, you're going to pay $842.25. In Lexington, you'll pay $2,370. In York, you'll pay $1,500. Spartanburg, $1,500. Greenville, $3,000. So that's just a very basic scenario to kind of show you, take the big spreadsheet, and then that's what it is. Just for a basic, that would be a very small subdivision. So the next thing to talk about is land disturbance, which is typically kind of separate. It's its own permit. You go through your plan review, you get an approval, and then when you're ready to move forward with your project, you actually get your land disturbance permit. At that point, you can move forward and start doing your grading and site work. So in Lexington County, they charge a flat fee. York County, they charge per acre of disturbance. Spartanburg County, there's a fee also per acre of disturbance. And then Greenville is doing something a little different where they're doing permitting by year. So they have a 2-year or a 5-year permit with the option to renew. So there is a kind of a fee break at the 5 years. So if you're planning and you know that, well, I'm going to be at the 3-year, you go ahead and get your 5-year permit. So,
Madam Chair.
Recognized.
Thank you. And I'm not being silly with this question. So in these two samples where you've used the 50 lot size, are you also using the 50 lot size for the other counties? And I ask because you've mentioned that sometimes it's not apples to apples, and there have been a few cases where we're comparing different things. And so I just want to confirm, honest to goodness, this right here is apples to apples, noting some variances if it's acreage versus a flat fee.
yes. So for this particular slide where we're just talking about the 50, what you're basically going to be looking at is on your residential sheet here, you're looking at the first and second column. So if you had a sketch plan and there was a charge, and then if you have the plan review. So that's the only thing that we're looking at on this slide is those first two columns.
Thank you.
Director Fuller, I just want to make a brief note for everybody that we are at 4:00 and we have debt service, Millage Agencies to speak, and Auditor Brawley. So I just wanted to point that out as we all are aware of time. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And you'll notice on this slide, Richland County is missing. That's because we do not charge a fee for land disturbance. So that's what this next slide illustrates. So same scenario, major residential subdivision, 50 lots. And now I'm going to tell you we have 12.5 acres of disturbance because in the last slide I said some people are charging by acre. So this slide shows you what those same counties that we looked at in the first graph, it's what they're doing. And as you'll see, Richland County is at 0. This slide's a little bit busy, I apologize, but if you look at the bottom, these are just some various fees that people are charging for. Fees for additional reviews, for sureties, infrastructure inspections, re-inspections, stop work orders, and then individual lot notice of intents. as you can see, if you go through each jurisdiction, there either is a line colored in or there's not. And if you look at Richland County, we are missing out on all of those as revenue sources right now. So the last couple pages of that same packet you have give you the full breakdown of this scenario, but it's just kind of drive home the point. This is a real scenario. This did happen in Richland County. It's a major subdivision, 150 lots, 32 acres of land disturbance, and the roads and drainage are proposed to be public infrastructure. So in this, you have two different applicants. One is going to make it through the entire review cycle with just 2 plan reviews. So they had an original submission. They got redlined comments from all the county plan reviewers. They resubmitted, they acknowledged all the comments, they incorporated them, and they got their approval. They get 2 site inspections a month, and their land disturbance permit's open for 2 years. Then you have applicant B, who has the same scenario, but it took them 11 plan review cycles to get all of their approvals. They receive 1 inspection a week. On average, they get 2 to 3 complaints a week from the community. They had 1 major modification to their plan, 1 stop work order, and their land disturbance permit is open for 2 years. So you see at the bottom, the green is the first applicant, who was an ideal applicant. The second applicant had a little more trouble, not only navigating the plan review process, but also during construction. And really, the biggest thing here, I think, is if you look at Richland County, it doesn't matter if you do a really good job and do all your due diligence as an engineer or as an owner, or as a contractor, or you don't. You still pay the exact same price. Lexington County is doing something very different, which if you look through the details in that 11 by 17 packet, you'll see they're doing a lot of things differently over there as far as fees go. So even if you're doing everything great there, you're still paying $42,000. If you don't, then there is some accountability there, and you're paying $58,000. Even if you look at Spartanburg, who had the next lowest fee schedule, they're still twice as high as us. So that's it. I could go on for days, but I'm not allowed to. So,
Thank you so much, Director Fuller. Ms. Barron, was that a? Okay, Ms. Barron has a question. You recognize.
I'll be brief, and you don't have to give it to me now. You can give it to me later.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I want to be sensitive to our time. You told us all of this for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so since you told us all this for a reason, I haven't had a chance to look at this packet.
Yes.
I sure would like to hear what your recommendations are.
Thank you.
And so, because I do see where this could be a way for us to bridge the gap in some deficits that we have, especially, people like to build stuff in District 7. And I get all the emails when they do it really well and when they do it really wrong. It would be a way for us to have some accountability. So at a later date, probably before we vote on the budget, I would like, if it's here, tell me it's here.
It is.
It's
I
here.
apologize. Yes, the very last line, the very last row on each page
Okay,
says Richland County proposed.
okay. Okay, got it, got it. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, may I be recognized, Madam Chair? Yes. All right, so I will wrap us up on the last few slides. The next one is regarding debt service recommendations. So again, if you're looking in your budget book, it's page 73. So if you look at the 24 adopted versus the 25 recommended, for the general fund, so that's our general obligation bonds, those are relatively stable. We are not at this time recommending issuing more GO debt in the upcoming fiscal year. We also have shown fire special assessment and IP revenue bonds. Again, those are pretty much just the same debt service as last year, just the current year payment. We also are showing the millage agencies. And at the time of this presentation, we did not have any changes to their debt, but they may come up and speak to that further in just a few moments. But overall, total debt service of $84,588,000 for fiscal year '25. And then moving forward to the millage agencies, and again, if y'all recall, they will be speaking on their behalf in just a minute, but I wanted to summarize it all for you in the slides as well. So we have here each of our millage agencies. We have their 2023 approved, their 2024 approved, their 25 requests, and then the auditor's office also provided us with their 25 rollback millage budget and their 25 mill cap budget. So all of that was provided to each of the millage agencies, and then they responded with their request. So we have that in your kind of third to last column there. I do want to point out what the different colors mean. So if you're looking at your screen, the green means that the millage agency requested no increase, so they were comfortable within their rollback budget as provided by the auditor's office. The yellow means that they propose going to their mill cap, and the orange means that they're actually over their mill cap budget. So that was 2 agencies, and again, they're here to speak on that in just a few moments. I will say Columbia Area Mental Health was not able to be here today, but they are requesting about a $50,000 increase over the rollback budget, and this was discussed with the auditor's office, and they believe that they can fund that within their current millage. Any questions on millage agencies? Yes, sir.
Mr. Livingston, you're recognized.
Just one question about the highlighted area there. That's a no dollar increase or no mill increase?
So the rollback budget is actually their revenue.
Whatever that
neutral.
number is, the highlighted number, does that number represent a no mill increase or no dollar increase? 'Cause there could be a difference.
So it's kind of hard to say it that way because this is a year of reassessment. So what the auditor provides, and I certainly don't want to speak for him because I know he's going to come up in just a few moments, but what he provides is a revenue neutral, which means that their millage would actually decrease most often. And so it is a revenue neutral plus any new development and transfers. That is what that rollback budget is. But again, I'll certainly let Mr. Brawley speak more intelligently on that subject. All right. Any other questions before the millage agencies speak?
No, I think that's it. So going into millage agencies, we had a sign-up sheet at the front, so we had a few folks sign up. And I believe each agency is given 5 minutes to speak or present, but I don't think we're doing any questions back and forth. Somebody please confirm what the rules are.
So the presentation is as you spoke. So ideally, you would want them to present fully. And certainly as members of council, you have the ability to ask questions as you instruct the body.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. We do have, how many? 6 folks that's signed up to speak with 5 minutes each, so that it is right there at 30 minutes. And so I do want to point out to folks that as we ask questions to each, please be mindful that we leave enough time for other millage agencies to also be able to get their time to present this evening, so they're not rushed during their time period. All right. Vice Chair Pugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, we have, if I butcher your name, please forgive me. We have Sierra Benzine from Richland 1. And please state your name and agency and address for the record. And you have 5 minutes to speak, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Sierra Bing. I'm with Richland. All right. My name is Sierra Bing. I'm with Richland School District 1. The address is 1616 Richland Street. Today we're presenting our budget request to you guys. Next slide, please. And we thank you for this opportunity. On this afternoon, I wanted to show you guys our board members and leadership. Of course, our board chair is Dr. Erin Bishop, and our commissioners are Ms. Angela Clyburn, Mr. Robert Lomanat, Mr. Jamie Devine. We're on to Ms. Barbara Weston, Tamika Myers, and Ms. Cheryl Harris, as well as our superintendent, Dr. Witherspoon, who could not be with us today for another engagement. Next slide, please. As you can see on the graph before you, there is a slide concerning our percentage of spent on instruction for fiscal year 23, as we are currently in fiscal year 24, and that wraps up on June 30th. We're using our prior year data. As you can see, there are categories before you to represent instruction, leadership, operations, and other commitments. Instruction piece, you can see that is about 81.2%. In that category, those are the personnels of our teachers, our teacher assistants, our counselors, as well as our social workers and guidance counselors. And then if you go on to the next biggest piece in our chart, we're at 16.03% for our operation. And this is our building services, our financial services categories, our transportation, and our food services for our school district. So we're operating at about 16% there. 2.4% is our leadership. That is our superintendent, our board, our administrative staff, as far as our principals and assistant principals. And then our last percent is a 0.26%, and that is our other commitments, such as our debt services and capital projects. Next slide, please. Before you is a slide of our fiscal year 23 general fund expenditures. As you can see, our salaries and fringes for our personnel within our district, this includes everyone as far as our district level and our teachers and our school levels. Our percentage is about 84%. This is about an average for our school districts within the state of South Carolina. You're looking at between 81 to 85%, and we're at 84%. And then we have our purchase services, and those are our outgoing services that we may include a contractor to come in and do services for us. That's at 9%. And then we have our supplies for our teachers and our districts, our schools, at 5%. And then we have a 1% for both our equipment and other services. So our equipment is, of course, our vehicles and everything, and our other services could be miscellaneous items that does not fall in our state funded categories. Next slide, please. So give you a little bit of the legislative background that is being pushed out for our school district. So this year in fiscal year 25, our legislative has asked for a budget increase of our starting teachers' salaries to increase that state salary minimum to $47,000. Right now, Richland 1 is operating at $43,600. So this will include a 8% increase to get to that $47,000 state mandated minimum salary scale. And then we move forward, our House passed a portion of their budget, and then our Senate turned around and reduced the budget by $30 million, and that affected us in our state funding. So we did receive a decrease due to the cut of $30 million reduced from our Senate's budget. And these are proposed, as the state and Senate has concluded, signed on as of last week, but they will be coming back for conference in June to get somewhere in between as far as our funding. And lastly, state mandated. It was passed on for our bus drivers. They are considered state employees. And so our bus drivers for the House, it was represented as a 1.5% increase. However, our Senate requested that we increase our bus driver salaries to 2.75%. So we're looking at an increase there. This year, we did a 25% increase on the state salary scale for all of our bus drivers. So these are some of the state mandated items that we are required to do as a school district, and we are having to use our funds to make sure that we can make these state mandates happen. Next slide, please. Here are some of our yearly expenditures that we're looking at as far as our budget.
That's your time.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you weren't able to get to your last few slides, but they do kind of show, like you said, your budget expenditures for us to look at. And then it looks like you were gonna go into your county auditor estimated taxes. I guess one question that I had is, you mentioned cuts. Well, basically you have mandates coming from the state, but we know, like you said, there was reduction in the state. How much of that were you all cut? So I know you still got something, but do you know, based on the cut, how much of that you would have received?
We received a $500,000 cut.
Any further questions? All right, Ms. Barron, then Ms. Newton.
So, the carry forward of $8 million, could you talk about that a little bit for me? Because I'm, without any explanation, it's a carry forward, so it's something left over? What are we carrying forward? And maybe I should know this, but I don't.
This is information that we received from the county, so it is carried forward from our, if I'm not mistaken, our prior taxes that we did not receive. These are carried forward taxes from then.
Thank you.
Ms. Barron, I know is here. I think he'll address some of that too in his. Ms. Newton, you're recognized.
Thank you, and I'm not sure who this question is for, but do we have an idea on when the state budget will be finalized, and so we'll know what these numbers are?
Right now, per our newsletter that we did receive from our legislative people, they are going to be back in session June 18th. So we're not looking forward to a finalized budget around June 18th through June 20th.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Richland County School District 1? Anyone online? Ms. Carrillo? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Chair, next we have Dr. Raines from Midlands Technical College. Dr. Raines, if you could come down, state your name, address, and you have 5 minutes to speak, sir.
Madam Chair, members of council, Ron Raines, President, Midlands Technical College, P.O. Box 2408, Columbia, South Carolina. I'm going to invite my Vice President for Business Affairs to come down and talk about the budget, but I just wanted to take a moment and thank the council. I think most of you, if not all of you, know that I'm retiring, and the incredible support from this council and all councils since I've been working with you has been great. I want to thank you for looking at MTC as an investment versus a cost, and your investment has paid off in your college. So thank you for that. But then I'm going to ask Debbie Walker to come down and talk about our budget. Ms. Walker did sign up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize Ms. Walker.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mackey, and the entire council. My name is Debbie M. Walker. I am the Vice President for Business Affairs at Midlands Technical College. Our address is P.O. Box 2408, and that's Columbia, South Carolina 29202, I believe. As the president said, I'd like to thank you for all that you have done for Midlands over the years, and I'd like to thank you for what you will continue to do for us. We appreciate your support. Just wanted to say that the college is celebrating 50 years of our 50-year anniversary of educating and training students, and so we're so excited about that. Currently, we have 12,700 annual credit enrollments, 11,100 annual continuing education enrollments, and 73% of our credit students are in career programs. Our next page, the funding, we're jointly funded, Code of Law 5953-1730, Richland and Lexington counties, and it's based on the population changed there was a change with the 2020 census. And so Richland County funds us at 58.6% and Lexington County 41.4%. Also, the funding provides operations of our facilities. We also, our operating request is $8,158,100, or the cap. Our capital is $1 million, and our debt service is $1 million. And that's our budget request.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions related to Midlands Tech? All right, I see Councilwoman Newton and then Councilman Weaver.
Thank you. So I'm looking at a lot of documents here. And so when we look at the operating budget, it's the cap, but it's the no mill increase. Is that correct for this budget request?
That's correct.
Okay,
No
thank
mill
you.
increase.
Councilman Weaver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is very similar to Councilwoman Newton. So the 8.1 million, that's, when you say the cap, that's the cap under Act 388?
Actually, that's the no mill increase, or we're saying, or the cap.
Okay, so
And that
which
is
would
the
be,
cap under
which would
Act
be lower, the
388.
cap or the
The no mill increase.
the no mill increase?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Madam Chair, next we have Mr. Taurus Lewis from the Richland County Recreation Commission. Mr. Lewis, if you can come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes to speak, sir.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time and opportunity. My name is Taurus Lewis. I'm Executive Director for Richland County Recreation Commission. Our agency address is 7473 Park Lane Road. I'm joined today by our CFO, Mr. Ryan Naza, and our in-house counsel, Mr. Lawrence Flynn. You can go to the next slide. We submitted a balanced budget to council for approval. One of the reasons we submitted the budget, you will see an increase in our budget. We asked for the millage rate as well as the 1.84 million from the bond. You will see a significant increase in our capital improvement for the agency. We have a lot of infrastructure that need to be improved. Over the last several months in my presence, we've tried to improve infrastructure. We have roofs that's leaking, HVAC units that need to be replaced. We're in the completion of the Hopkins Park pool renovation. We're soliciting property for Pocket Park in the Lower Richland area, and as well as other infrastructure needs that need to be taking place throughout the agency. I know a lot of you may have some questions about that increase in the 8.4 million from the bond. So I want to ask Mr. Lawrence Flynn to come up and briefly brief council on that so he can address any questions or concerns.
Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, you recognize.
Thank you all. Lawrence Flynn, I'm with Pope Flynn Law Firm here in Columbia. So in 2022, and this is a little bit of a tortured story, so bear with me for just a second. In 2022, Richland Recreation refunded their 2014 bonds, which were part of the 2012 referendum authorization for $50 million in total authorization. So in 2012, they did roughly $26 million. In 2014, they did roughly $24 million. In 2022, we refunded those for savings. Basically, all the projects had been done, except there was a balance of about $1.8 million remaining from the 2014 bond proceeds. When we refunded in 2022, we refunded the 2012 bonds on a tax-exempt basis for savings, and we did the 2014 bonds because you can no longer do an advance for funding on a taxable basis with the option with the bank to renew them on a tax-exempt basis come March the 1st of 2024. And in order to renew those on a tax-exempt basis, typically the tax rules say you're supposed to spend tax-exempt bond proceeds within 3 years. The agency had $1.8 million of bond proceeds that were still outstanding from 2014. As bond counsel, our advice was you have to spend these monies. You either have to spend them on authorized projects or you have to take the money as otherwise authorized in state law, deposit them in towards the redemption of the debt. At the end of the day, that's ultimately what was forced to be done. So that $1.8 million was applied to reduce debt service on the refunding bonds. The way the bonds were structured is it reduced the 2025 debt service payment by $1.84 million, meaning that Richland Recreation historically put on 12.5 mils for operations and 2.5 mils for debt service, for a total of 15 mils. What's being requested today is to reduce that debt service millage number to account for the money that was taken from the residual bond proceeds to reduce debt service, move that over to the operating side in order to keep millage static at the 15 total mills. There will obviously be an increase in operating millage, which would be used for capital, which would be projects that they intended to do but couldn't do with the proceeds that were available at their discretion because of what was authorized in the bond referendum. But this would allow them to basically take that $1.8 million, move it over for capital items for things that are deferred maintenance and items that they otherwise need, but there would be no net millage impact directly on the taxpayers because everything would wash out to the static 15 total mills. It would just increase the operating millage, which is also within their Act 388 adjustment thresholds. They have the ability to go up 2.8 mils with the Act 388 3-year look back, and this would be obviously below that. It'd be a little less than 2 mils on the operating side. I know there's a lot of information to throw at you at once. I welcome any questions.
43 seconds left. Is there anything else? Or we want to open up for questions? I don't want to eat your time.
I think that the net case here is that the plan is not to increase millage in any way. It is to keep millage static throughout, staying at the 15 mils, but obviously being able to recapture the money that was otherwise lost, and it was strategically budgeted that way.
Thank you so much. I guess for me, my question is, you mentioned that the 15 mils, as you say, based on Act 388, is within the right of where you can go up to. But on our sheet, it shows that that amount is over the millage cap. So how are you calculating your numbers to say it's not over the millage cap?
So we share, and there's actually a copy of that in your slides, but we can get with the auditor's office and confirm those numbers are there. Obviously, we are not intending to go over the authorized millage thresholds, but you know, the rough math is we were at 12.5 mils. You can look back for the current budget year and the 3 prior years based on CPI and population at a very baseline number. We're about 20% of adjustment factor, which would give you close to 2.1 mils that you could otherwise make the adjustment on, and we're within that threshold because we've not raised millage since 2020.
Okay. I will save more of that for the auditor's presentation just so I can reconcile the two things. Any further questions? I'd see Ms. Barron and then Ms. Newton.
So I too have a very similar question, and it may be more appropriate for Auditor Brawley. But I just, you know, you're asking for more money, but you're saying it's not going to be an impact on the residents. So I need a little more explanation as to how that can be, because clearly, and it's what's reported from our budget team,
Sure.
which is different from what you report.
So just by way of very, very quick summary, millage obviously gets levied in 2 buckets. Operating millage has the restrictions of Act 388, which means you can only raise it by CPI and population growth. Plus, we're a special purpose district, so you're subject to the provisions of being a special purpose district. We have to live within those parameters. Debt service millage is the security for debt, which is secured by a tax without limit as to rate or amount under the Constitution. So you can limit operating millage, you cannot limit debt service millage. We have reduced our debt service millage for a single year by virtue of having to take the $1.8 million residual bond proceeds and apply those towards the repayment of bonds. As a result, that means that in fiscal 25, our annual debt service payment went from $2.4 million to roughly $600,000. We're just simply saying we would like to take that money that would otherwise have been put in place for debt service millage and move it over to operating millage for this 1 year alone, and then we would go back to the standard 12.5 mils of operations, 2.5 mils of debt service in future budget years, because the debt service millage goes back to the 2.5 mil number in fiscal 26 and beyond.
I follow you, but Mr. So Mr. Brawley, you got a note, make a note. We need more information about this.
I'm sorry, Ms. Newton?
I'll be really quick, and it's not really a question, it's a statement. Ditto that, but also, when you look at the bond referendum, I just want to go on record. I know that we've had meetings before, that all those projects were not completed, and that there was a pocket park specifically for the Green Lakes neighborhood that was not done. And I've been assured that however it is that you work out your budget, that that's going to be part of your budget moving forward. But while we're talking about your budget, I would be remiss if I didn't say that. So I look forward to seeing that project part of your budget and completed, because it is overdue.
That message has been received, and it is currently a portion of the budget, obviously subject to the additional millage and operations that has otherwise been requested, but we'll understand and go back to the drawing board if something else changes.
Thank you.
I have one more question. Looking, and this isn't numbered, but just looking at one of these slides, it states that you all did not receive any state appropriations this year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
For any projects, you all did not receive state appropriations?
There is a potential for money available in the budget to acquire some large capital items, but we've not received it.
All right, thank you so much.
Madam Chair, next we have Mr. Tommy Stringfellow from Riverbanks Zoo. Mr. Stringfellow, if you can state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes to speak, sir.
Great, thank you. Good evening, council. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about our budget. I also have Ashley Harris, our VP of Finance, should you get into details. I'm gonna make mine pretty simple, so simple math. So 50 years, this is a great public-private partnership. This is the 50th year that we've asked for no increase in millage. And that's what you'll see on I think the sheet that you were submitted. We're looking at about a 4% increase or projected increase in expenses this year, mainly for to stay competitive with our wages, that 11.8% increase in the state health care plan that was noted earlier, cost of utilities, animal care, maintenance, those things. So in order to submit a balanced budget, our intentions are to use our earned revenues to make up the difference, our private partnership with the society to make up that different 4% so we can present that balanced budget. Just to give you a quick snapshot of what we submitted, just so you'll know where those dollars are going, the millage dollars. You'll see that personnel is the biggest expense we have at the zoo. 37% is the operating. That's where most all of that millage goes. And then 4%, none of it goes to the capital expenditures. That comes out of what we get from what we either earn or from what donors give us, or even what the society generates to build new things with. That's my presentation. I'll try to make up some time. I'll be glad to answer questions to keep it simple.
Thank you, Mr. Stringfellow. Any questions? Councilwoman Newton.
This is a real easy one. Do we have this physically on the dais, or is this just something that you're showing us up there, Madam Clerk? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stringfellow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stringfellow. Madam Chair, we have Ashley Harris, if she chooses to.
That was as if needed.
Okay, but that is the conclusion of everyone that signed up to speak, ma'am.
All right, let's see. So next we have item 6, the 5-year assessment. Auditor Brawley, you are recognized, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mackey, and council members. We're in the thrust of a reassessment year. And I don't think, do you have my slides? Okay. Just to give you this is just an overview of what a reassessment will do for the county. Reassessment, basically for revenue, is a neutral. It allows revenue to remain neutral. So the mill value will go up because of reassessment. but the actual revenue for reassessment will remain the same because the millage rate will be rolled back. What I have up for you briefly, if you don't have it, I'll make sure that you have it, is basically what the statute tells us that we have to do. And this is done under statute 1237-251. And just to give you an idea of what we do for the rollback calculation, I don't have any solid numbers other than what we've done for the budget estimates at this point, because the assessor is still going through making sure that what they have done in terms of reassessment for real property is accurate. And we don't have any solid numbers at this point from the Treasurer's Office in terms of what the carry forward dollars could possibly be for this year, other than the estimates that we have. But in terms of what we do, the next slide, please. To calculate the rollback number, we take what we currently tax for this year, everything that we've taxed for this year, and we multiply that times whatever the millage rate is for whatever the millage agency is. And we determine that's the dollars that we would have generated for this year. Then that is then divided by the reassessed numbers. Once the assessor gives the final numbers, that is then divided by the reassessed numbers for the same properties, same vehicles, same real estate, so that everything remains constant except for the reassessment numbers, which increases in real estate, I think, at this point, a little over $200 million in additional assessment. And that gives us what we consider the rollback number, which, again, allows revenue to remain neutral. And the thing about reassessment is done every 5 years, and the General Assembly wanted to protect the taxpayers in terms of making sure that there was no windfall in revenue as a result of reassessment. Once we've determined what the rollback number is, we then add into that what is naturally our growth in the county. The additional new construction, ATIs, accessible transfers of interest where people have brought additional properties, and renovations. At this point, as I've said earlier, the numbers are still kind of fluid in between offices. We're getting some of that refined. The final numbers will come into more light once we end the fiscal year so that we can actually know what the numbers are. Because between now and June 30th, we will still be abating some taxes, maybe adding some additional taxes on. That's kind of where we are with reassessment. I'll be glad to answer any questions about reassessment, but I understand that there are other questions. So.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Do you have a question about reassessment, Mr. Livingston?
Yes, one quick.
Go right ahead, sir.
Although we're talking about making sure, reassessment, it's going to be revenue neutral. And sometimes I have to explain to my constituents that does not mean that taxes may or may not go up as a result of that, because revenue neutral just simply, it's not speaking about each individual property, it's just simply talking about in an aggregate perspective, because it could mean that some people's property tax may go up and some may go down, correct?
Absolutely. When I say revenue neutral, I'm talking about in terms of the dollars that the millage agencies get. Now, in terms of how the impact on the taxpayer, your property may have been capped at 15%. Mine may have only increased by 2%. So you are going to have a larger increase in your taxes than the person that had a 2% adjustment on their real values. Right.
That's what happened to your tax.
Right. I'm talking about revenue neutral, just strictly for millage agencies.
That's what I want to make, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent point.
Thank you. Mr. Auditor, I'm going to move us to, I guess, the questions related to some of the millage agencies and the cap, starting with Richland County Recreation's statement of the 15 mil would not exceed the millage cap. And so I heard you state that your numbers or the numbers that you have right now are what's already included in our budget. And based upon that, their request is above the millage cap. So can you shed any light on that?
Correct. What we always present to the budget office and the council is a no mill value and the millage cap. The millage cap this year is based on an increase of 4.98%. That was the CPI and growth for the county. Richland Recreation Commission has an additional 1.9 mills left that over the 3-year period that they have not used. So we only presented the cap. So if council decides to allow them to get the look back, which is 1.9, then they can accomplish what they're trying to do.
Is there any spreadsheet that I could see actually what you're saying, those numbers to match up what they're saying? Does that make sense to actually see their rollback numbers and what that total is?
Correct. I can give you an estimate of what their rollback number is at this point, but I do know that at this point they have 1.9 mills left from the previous 3 years that council, at your pleasure, can allow them to get, which will then give them the budget that they're asking for. I don't think it would take the entire 1.9 mills, but it would take some additional millage above what the cap is.
I would like to see that at least some additional column that reflects what it is you're saying. And then off the top of your head, do you know if that applies to any other millage agency?
Oh, absolutely, because over the last 3 or 4 years, millages have been kept basically at the same level by this council. So each of those years, the millage cap, either the millage could have gone up for all of those entities. And what we have kept is a list of all of those entities and the amount of additional millage, if this council decides, could apply if they wanted to.
You recognize Ms. Newton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brawley, listen to what I mean and not necessarily what I say, because I'm struggling with how to ask this question. When we look at the look back, are there rules that say how often you can have a look back or that set a dollar value on the look back? That is to say, are you allowed to do a look back every year? Is it something you're only allowed to do once every 3 years up to X amount? Are there any parameters around that?
Excellent question. It's up to council's discretion as long as there's look back millage over the past 3 years. If council decides, they can allow that millage agency to increase the millage by X amount.
Okay.
Up to the number, just up to that number that still has not been used for the previous 3 years.
And then here's the silly follow-up question to that. So when you do a look back in whatever amount, those additional funds then come from?
The increased millage, which is a tax increase on the taxpayers.
Thank you.
And I think the other portion of the question that I didn't answer is that as long as there's millage there, it's up to council whether it uses, but again, it's 3 years is what the look back is. So for example, the Recreation Commission has 1.9. If they used all 1.9, if you all approved the entire 1.9 mills this year, that means that it would have no look back next year. Or if you use 1.4 of it, then it would have 0.5 for next year, if you all wanted to use that.
Now, I didn't have a follow-up, but now he said more things. I'm sorry. So how does the 3-year work again? That you're just looking in 3-year increments, or?
Yeah, the current year and the previous 3.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Weaver, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to I want to make sure I understand this terminology again. As the chair pointed out, this is my second budget year, but I'm not remembering any of this stuff from last year. So the yellow for Richland 1, the mill cap budget. Now, what does that exactly mean? Does that mean that's a tax increase if we approve that amount?
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know if you can see that amount, but
if it's the millage
that's
cap,
a tax increase.
Yeah, if it's the millage cap, that means it went above a no mill increase. That's a tax increase.
That's a tax increase. Okay. So what would it have to be to not be a tax increase? That's the no mill budget?
That's correct.
Okay, so no mill means no tax increase. Okay. And then the other one, the orange, is over the mill cap budget. That means a tax increase too, correct?
That's correct. That means that they've gone to the cap and they've exceeded the cap and they're looking to get look back millage to make up that.
Exceeded the cap. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll try to remember that for the rest of the season, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And next year, thank you. Councilwoman Barron.
Thank you. So I have two questions for you, sir. And I think you just said it, but I must be honest, I was laughing at Mr. Weaver. He's my entertainment. So when you say the look back is indeed, if we decide to use that equates to an increase in taxes.
That's correct.
And if we decide to use the look back for the Recreation Commission, because they're the only ones that requested it, could council possibly do that across the board for all millage agencies if they did not request it?
Sure. I mean, that's entirely up to council. If those agencies have look-back millage, which all of them do, and if it's up to council, if they want to exceed the cap and then go to the look-back millage, yes.
So one final question about the look back, and that is, well, no, I won't ask that. Let me just move forward to my next question, because I might need a study session.
Okay.
And that is the carry forward. Can you give me a little bit more detail about that? Because I think Richland 1 was the only agency that mentioned a carry forward. So could you talk a little bit about that for me, please?
Yes, ma'am. Of course, budgeting is not an exact science. So what happens is that council approves the budget. Once we collect taxes throughout the fiscal year, at the conclusion of the fiscal year, the treasurer's office will only pay what council has approved to the millage agencies. So any funds that have been collected in excess of the approved budget is what we consider carry forward dollars, and then they're put into that millage agency's budget for the next year.
Okay, so all millage agencies could have carry forward dollars. And I know this is probably a question for the millage agencies, but again, Richland 1 is the only one that actually, obviously showed that. So with that, do they all have carry forward, they could possibly have carry forward dollars that perhaps was not reported as a part of their budget?
No, ma'am. Each of the budgets that we have presented to the millage agencies and to our budget department and to you all include those carry forward
Okay,
dollars.
very well. That's okay. Thank you.
Yes.
You recognize Ms. Newton.
Thank you. And just as an aside, Councilwoman Barron, the auditor gives great private tutoring. I've had it every year, and I'll be coming back. But so the way that you explained the look back actually clicked differently for me this year. So I'm going to say some words, and you can tell me if it's accurate. So you get the look back when we've not increased the millage. So essentially, whenever we do the look back, it's the tax increase that we didn't do before. So it's a slow roll tax increase, or really it's delayed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
Okay. Auditor Brawley, was there anything else in your presentation, or did we cover all your slides?
It was just those two slides. I just
Okay.
wanted to talk about the effects of reassessment, if you all had any questions, and then to answer any other questions that you had. And I am more than willing to make myself and my office available to anyone that would like to follow up discussions, just on how we arrive at our numbers and what we do in the office to support you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. I know the only additional information I would like to see, and I don't know if this is your office or our staff, but just understanding the, I guess, amounts that you mentioned as it relates to Recreation Commission, if they were to claim all the rollback, what is that number so we could exactly understand? And then also understanding with the requested amounts from these millage agencies, what would that dollar amount equate to on a tax bill for each of the agencies?
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
You recognize Ms. English.
Thank you. I do have one question, and I don't know who this goes to, but in the past, we have received like a 1 to 2 page overall budget from each of the millage agencies. Will we be getting that this year?
Yes, ma'am.
And okay, Councilwoman Barron kind of asked the question, but I was just asking, I was kind of curious about the reserves as well, because she was talking about those carry forward dollars.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. English. I have several staff shaking their heads in here, so you will get that information.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, thank you, Auditor Brawley. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Administrator Brown.
That concludes the budget presentations for this evening, Madam Chair.
Well, I guess before we officially conclude, can I just have a member of your staff speak briefly to next steps related to the budget process as a whole?
We absolutely can. Director Wilkerson will do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. I do, just briefly, as y'all are looking at this page, this slide, I just want to make sure y'all are aware, this is just their operating budget. So this does not include their debt service for any of these millage agencies. So when you're looking at this, is this just on the operating side? The previous discussion about the debt service showed their debt service piece, so they are separated out there. But as far as next steps, we do have another work session on Thursday in council chambers from 3 to 5. This will cover grants, special revenue funds, and also our capital improvement plan. We also have our public hearing coming up on May 23rd at 6 p.m. Again, we certainly invite the public to come and speak on that. Happy that several millage agencies came tonight, but I did hear that a few others that could not attend will attend the public hearing as well. We have second reading on June 6th. June 6th, and then we have third reading on June 18th.
Director Wilkerson, I'm hearing that it's June 4th.
I'm sorry.
It's a council meeting June 4th for second reading. Is that?
I think it's on Thursday, right? Thursday, June 6th.
Madam Chair, we have a regular council meeting on the 4th, and we have a special call meeting on the 6th.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Barron.
So you mentioned about the debt services.
Yes.
Not being on the slide. It would be helpful to have that all together so that we can make a comparison.
Absolutely. We'll certainly provide that going forward. And then one last announcement for you guys. I did send out an email last Friday, I believe, about the motion period opening. So please send your motions in. There was a small change in the email. It said Monday, May 28th at 9. So if y'all recall, Monday, May 27th is Memorial Day. So it should have said Tuesday, May 28th at 9. So I do apologize for that typo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments from the body?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second.
Branham,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Walker, Mackey,
Yes.
English, Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.